Today we are going to see the topic called disaster management cycle in the course disaster management. In early classes, we are seeing about what is meant by disaster. That is, disaster is nothing but the bad or the evil star, and as well as we are seeing about what are the objectives of the disasters, as well as what are the objectives of the disaster management plan, and various types of disaster. That is, natural disasters as well as the man-made disasters, and what is meant by vulnerability and what is the various levels of vulnerability and hazards. What are the major hazards, that is man-made hazards, as well as the natural hazards has been there. This everything we have seen in the previous classes, and also we have looked after the disaster management plan. The disaster management plan, which has been started by the year of 2005 after the Bhuj earthquake, and we have seen about the major disasters which has been occurred in the India, like earthquake, landslides, tsunami. These major disasters which has been occurred in the India, and we are looking after the National Disaster Management Plan and the objectives and scopes of the National Disaster Management Plan and the various levels of the disasters which has been mentioned in the Disaster Management Act by the year of 2005. That is level 0 to level 1. Level 0 will be looked after by the local government, and level 1 is of a district level, and level 2 is of the state level, and level 3 is of the national level. So each and every level will be interlinked with each other. Now we will be continuing our next topic, disaster management cycle. So this is the disaster management cycle. As I already said, the disaster management cycle will comprise of preparedness phase, mitigation phase, and response as well as the recovery phase. That is, three phases is mainly important in these cases. That is preparedness phase, mitigation phase, and post disaster phase. So you can able to see here. This is of event which has been occurred. Event is nothing but the disasters has been occurred over here. Before the disaster, we will having the mitigations as well as the preparedness phase. Preparedness phase, pre-impact phase has been there. That is, capacity building has been there. Then mitigation phases will be there. Then response phases. After this disaster, response phase will be there. After response, recovery phase, and after recovery phase, it is of a mitigation phase. So this is a continuous cycle which has to be taken into account in case of your disaster management cycle. So the response as well as the recovery phases will be taken into account of emergency as well as restoration as well as reconstruction activities. So this is about your disaster management cycle. We will be see one by one. The first one is a mitigation one. You can able to see here as disaster management phases, that is preparedness phase, response phase, recovery phase, and mitigation phase. So it is of a continuous cycle. Preparedness phase is before disaster, and this is of a response and recovery phase is of a after disaster, and mitigation is of a post disaster phase. So first we will see about the mitigation phase. In certain cases, some of the devastating effects of the disasters can be reduced before an actual event. For example, the evacuations may be orchestrated before the hurricanes and the floods, and early warnings allows the residents to seek the shelter from the tornadoes and approaching hurricanes. And sprinkler systems in the business and as well as the homes can reduce the overall risk of the total fire destructions. And specific types of the building constructions may be implemented in the hurricane or the earthquake-prone regions. And during these phases of disasters is often overlooked due to the facts that an impending incident has not raised an awareness of the need of mitigations. It may have a significant effect on the impact that the disasters will have that region and must remain in important considerations. So this is about the mitigation phase. So in the mitigation phase, some of the devastating effects of disasters can be reduced before than actual event. The next one is of preparedness as well as the planning phase. So disaster planning is more thoroughly discussed in the sections of external as well as the internal planning. It cannot be stressed enough, however, that the disaster management plan is not synonymous with the disaster planning. Many communities will have the pre-planned with the planned paper plans. So those paper plans will have the faulty assumptions, or similarly, it will not have workable conditions in a context after the response. So in addition to the paper plan, we are having the disaster planning in case of exercising, practicing, and revising the plan, which include the community as well as the emergency resource, which is likely to need to the coordinate during the actual event. This is about your preparedness phases or otherwise the planning phases of your disaster. Next one is a response phase. Response phase is a notifications and as well as the initial responses will be given. and the organization of the command and scene assessment can be provided in the response phase. Search and rescue operations can be taken into account of response phase. Extraction, triage, stabilization, and transport account can be taken in the response phase. And definite scene management will be looking after the response phase. And in the recovery phase is frequently underemphasized in the disaster plan, but it is crucial for the affected communities. During this phase, some semblance of order is restored, public utilities are re-established, and infrastructure begins to operate effectively. The scene withdrawal and the return to the normal operations usually occur simultaneously. Planning for withdrawal of the resource should begin from the onset of deployment, and rebuilding and restructuring may include mitigation measures in order to prevent a severe of an impact during the next event. And in the recovery phase, the treatment of the respondents is also vitally important during this phase for a critical stress debriefing and other support services that are evolved in this process. So these are all the phases, that is mitigation, response, recovery, are the phases which has been involved in the disaster management cycle. So the disaster management area in India has been taken into account, that is National Disaster Management Plan has been taken into account by the year of 2005. So the climatic hazards with the overall context of the disaster management will be looked after in these cases, and statutory responsibility of the state government as well as the central government will be taken into account. Similarly, the central government should provide the logistic as well as the financial support for all the states as well as the district level authorities, and we will have the elaborate response mechanisms at the national level as well as the state level response, which will be varying in day by day activities. And the national coordinating body is much more important with the disaster management plan, that is National Disaster Management Cell, that is NDMC, and Department of Agriculture and Corporation Ministry at Ministry of Agriculture. All these things will be have a coordinating work in order to have the disaster management cycles or in order to prevent from the disasters. All these ministries will be looking after a coordinating work. Here we can able to see some of the disasters and the nodal ministries which are responsible for particular type of disasters. So for natural disasters, the agricultural nodal ministry will be looking after that. Not only the agriculture, the entire government, the central government will be looking after the natural disasters, and air accidents will be looking after by the civil aviation. Civil strikes will be looking after by the home affairs. Railway accidents will be looking after by railways. Chemical disasters by the environmental ministries. Biological disasters by the health and family welfare ministries, and nuclear accidents will be looking after by the atomic energy ministries. So various disasters and various nodal ministries will be there for each and every disasters. Each and every nodal ministries will be looking after their roles and responsibilities. So this is the natural response mechanisms for your natural disaster. The Union Cabinet will be there. Under that Union Cabinet, we will be having the National Crisis Management Committee as well as Agriculture Ministers. So both will be having the secretary, and mostly the secretary will be from the Agriculture Department. And those some state relief commissioners, central relief commissioners, and Indian Meteorological Department, or other the Central Water Commission departments, or other departments will be taken care of by the secretary. And a crisis management group will be formed by all the state relief commissioners or central relief commissioners or Indian Meteorological Department, and all will be working together in order to have a disaster management, effective disaster management. Management mechanisms will involve in the following activities, that is integrated administrative machineries. National contingency action plan will be identified by the initiatives of various agencies and Department of Agriculture and Cooperations by the nodal department, and central relief commissioners will have the chief nodal officials at the national level, and the state or the district contingencies plans and relief manuals will be taken into account in case of the management activities. The national disaster response by the government of India will be grouped into these categories, that is National Crisis Management Committee (NCMC) under the Cabinet Secretary, and Crisis Management Group, that is EMG, under the Central Relief Commissioner, and group of ministers or group of secretaries and high level commissioners at the need base of the particular type of disasters will be taken care by the government of India. Similarly, the Government of India departments for the disaster responses, the following things, following ministries will be looking after that. That is, armed forces will be looking after by the Ministry of Defense, and the paramilitary forces by the Ministry of the Home Affairs, and international response by the Ministry of the External Affairs. These particles or these ministries will be looking after the disaster response phases. And the Government of India Department for the Disaster Response, other government of ministries or government departments are the Rural Development, Drinking Water Supply, Power, Telecom, Health and Urban Development Ministries, Flood and Public Distributions and Shipping Ministries, Surface Transports, Railway and Civil Aviation Ministries, Women and Child Development, Water Resource and Animal Husbandry, and Indian Meteorological Department. These are all the various departments will be looking after your disaster response phases. The salient features of disaster management policies will be involved in the recognition of linkages between the natural disasters and development, connection of specific programs like DPAP, DDP, NWDPRA, and waste and development programs for managing the natural disasters, and emphasis on forecasting and warming using advanced technologies. Human resource development will be looking after the main part in the central sector scheme for the disaster management and setting up of the National Center for Disaster Management and setting up of the disaster management faculties in the states and programs for the community participations and public awareness will be given, highly given the awareness and observing the National Disaster Reduction Day and as well as activities to achieve the goals and objectives of the national disaster management activities. The external assistance or the policies will be involved if offered as a solidarity accepted with the gratitude. And after the good judgment, the international response overwhelmingly has been given for the national disaster management activities. And bilateral agreements suggested by the some countries for the emergency responses will be looking after as a external assistance. A disaster response arrangement in the state level or state cabinet, state crisis management group, headed by the chief secretary of the state, and institutions of the relief commissions in the states, and the states of the district contingencies plans or the relief border provisions. So, after the Andhra Pradesh earthquake, hazard mitigation project outcomes has been taken into account. As an example here, as an hazard mitigation studies has been done by the international consultants and Indian Meteorological Department had given the early warning capacity through the Doppler radar systems and infrastructure creation and restoration has been done for the floods, that is drain and embankments, and for the road restoration and for storm shelters and electricity transmission distributions. But whatever the system or policies or capabilities, it is nothing but the national disaster management has been taken into account. The observations which has been made in that particular scheme was recognition of linkage between the natural reserves and the development activities and connecting the development programs to the disaster management activities as well as the forecast and the early warning system new technologies has been used in that particular system and adaptive capacity by creating a management system has been done for the relief recovery as well as the speedy recovery of the disasters. Thank you very much.